Hello and welcome to today's webinar on optimizing Amazon EC2 spend, EC2 purchasing options and programs. My name is Jonathan Lacour. I'm the CTO at Mission, and we also have Bhushan Tomar, a solutions architect at AWS.
Hello, everyone.
So let's quickly introduce a little bit about what we're going to discuss today. So there's many aspects to cost optimization, but today we really want to focus in on Amazon EC2. And why is that? Well, based upon my experience as working at a partner, we've seen that EC2 optimization represents the most impactful starting point for cost optimization. And now's a good time to really investigate how you can save by taking advantage of some of the different ways to purchase EC2 instances and some programs that Mission actually has to offer. So with that, let's discuss our agenda for today. So first, we'll introduce a little bit about ourselves and Mission. We'll talk about the different EC2 purchasing options that are available to AWS customers. And we will talk about best practices, about how you should mix and match these different choices. Finally, we'll go through the Mission RIO program, which is a very cool and innovative program that you can take advantage of, which gives you access to some great RI savings and gets you down the path of optimization more quickly. And finally, we'll have some Q&A between Bhushan and myself to talk about some of the issues that came up during the webinar. So let's get started. So as I said, first we're going to do introductions. Again, my name is Jonathan Lacour, CTO at Mission. I'm a cloud industry veteran. I've been around the industry for quite some time. I've been using cloud to build out SaaS applications, enterprise applications, since kind of the beginning of cloud. And I'm based out of Los Angeles, California. And I'm a product and technology guy, a programmer, a big foodie, and I really enjoy a good bespoke suit. Although you can't tell today because I'm wearing a t-shirt, but normally, if I can try to get into a bespoke suit, I will. So now let's introduce Bhushan.
Hi, I'm Bhushan Tomar, Solutions Architect with AWS. In total, I have like 15 years of experience in like ERP, CRM systems, building software products, as well as enterprise architecture. I'm based out of Orange County, and yeah, loves to travel and explore new places and spend time with my 6-year-old. Yeah, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bhushan. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Mission. I think everyone who's attending the webinar probably already knows about AWS, so no need to dive in deep there. But let's talk a little bit about Mission. We are a leading AWS consulting and managed service provider based out of Los Angeles and Boston. And we actually are the combination of 3 top AWS partners. Over the last year, we've been combining, and now we've joined forces and we have a very comprehensive suite of services to help architect, migrate, manage, and optimize in the cloud. We like to think of ourselves as sort of your mission control for the cloud. So in terms of architecting, we provide things like migration readiness assessments, technology road mapping and POCs, and guidance around AWS best practices. We do guided cloud transformation and AWS migrations, including full transformations and lift and shift migrations. We can implement CI/CD to get you fully down the path of being cloud native, including infrastructure as code and configuration management. Finally, we offer a suite of managed services, including managing of your AWS account, 24/7 monitoring and support, AI ML-based security solutions and services, and continuous DevOps consultation. And touching really on the topic we're discussing today, optimization, we can do continuous review, cost optimization and attribution, application performance management. We also offer discounted access to AWS, certain AWS services, and we can do AWS WellArchitected reviews as well. So that's a little bit about Mission. And now let's get to the topic of the day, which is Amazon EC2. So AWS, when they introduced EC2 over 10 years ago now, there were very few options, but in that period of time, AWS is notorious for extremely rapid innovation and constantly coming out with new ways to consume their services. And EC2, being one of the older services that AWS provides, more mature services, is really showing that now, because there are 4 main ways that you can purchase EC2 instances. And those different ways offer a balance of cost, flexibility, and complexity. And knowing about the differences is really useful in making sure that you're optimized. So we're going to review each in detail, but I wanted to have this slide available to everyone so that you can kind of get an at-a-glance overview of the differences between the four main options. So first is on-demand instances. And these are sort of the default option, the first one that was introduced with Amazon EC2, and it is the pioneer for utility-based, consumption-based billing, right? With on-demand instances, you pay by the hour or the second for the operation of that virtual machine, of that instance. There's no commitment or upfront fees. You get the greatest degree of flexibility, but it does come at a cost. Because you don't have to make any sort of commitment or advance payment, you pay the highest price for an on-demand instance. That doesn't make them inappropriate or bad to use. It just means that you have to be aware and understand how best to apply on-demand instances. Next up are spot instances. This is sort of a unique approach to gaining access to compute resources. And essentially, it's AWS offering you access to spare capacity that is underutilized, that they're willing to sell you at a much lower price. As it says here, you can get discounts of up to 90% off of on-demand pricing. But that comes at a trade-off of complexity. Spot instances can disappear at any given moment and require you to make some application level changes to support. We'll go into more detail on that in a moment. Next up is dedicated hosts. Dedicated hosts are akin to a physical dedicated server, and these have fairly niche use cases, but there are definitely use cases that you will know when you see them, such as performance or compliance. Now, the advantage of these is that you get the full benefit of a physical server, but with all the niceties of AWS and full integration with AWS for things like VPCs and highly granular IAM. Finally, the last option is reserved instances, and these are very nuanced. There's a bunch of different levers you can pull on within reserved instances to really maximize their benefit, and this is a great way to make a very impactful optimization on most customers that we've encountered. But there's a lot to understand, and essentially a reservation is all about making a commitment, and then there's some choices you have to make along with that commitment that impact how much you can save. And they can actually be resold in an RI marketplace, which we'll also talk about in a moment. So first up, let's touch on on-demand. As I mentioned, these were introduced at the very beginning of EC2, and by the hour or second consumption utility model, and the default way that you consume. Oftentimes when we go into a customer who hasn't performed any optimization, we'll find that they're doing nothing but on-demand instances. The use cases for on-demand, because they have high flexibility and low complexity, but higher cost, is really when you require that flexibility, right? When you're not willing to make a commitment or can't make a commitment or an upfront payment, where you have short-term or spiky, unpredictable workloads that can't be interrupted, and for test and develop use cases where you might be spinning up a workload for a very brief period of time and then spinning it back down again. That's where on-demand is most appropriate. But what we've discovered is oftentimes it's the only thing that is in use in a particular AWS account. If that sounds like you're a very good candidate for optimization here. So next up, let's talk about Spot. Spot is, as I said, a very unique and very interesting approach to the problem of getting access to compute. So you're purchasing spare compute capacity up to 90% off of on-demand pricing. You effectively make a bid for how much you're willing to pay, and when compute capacity is available at that price point, AWS will provide you that instance. The key thing here, though, is that with only a 2-minute warning, AWS can reclaim that instance, which means that in that 2-minute window, once you receive a notification, your application will have to save state off to some more persistent location, like an S3 bucket or to an EBS snapshot, databases, things of that nature, to ensure that your work is saved once that instance goes away. Because of that nature, you've got this, as you can see at the bottom, that orange high or low degree of flexibility and high degree of complexity there. But you're going to get the greatest cost savings possible here. That said, because of their nature, their use cases are slightly more limited than some of our other options. So they're really useful for applications that have flexible start and end times, or that are only feasible at very low prices, or for urgent computing needs for large amounts of additional capacity. use case that I commonly see is for reporting, right? So if you have, monthly financial reports that can run, within any 48 to 72 hour period, potentially at the end of the month, you can just make a bid for a very low cost fleet of spot instances and do the work when it's available, the compute capacity is available, and then be okay with it, because it's not a real-time workload. It's out of band. Bhushan, actually, do you have any good examples of Spot that you've seen utilized for cost optimization purposes?
Oh, yeah, of course. So there are many customers who have reduced their overall spend significantly by switching specific workload to Spot instances. One of the example that comes to my mind is CoreLogic. CoreLogic is the largest provider of property information analytics and property-related risk management services in Australia and New Zealand. So CoreLogic replaced their EC2 fleet with Spot instances and use a worker pattern to reduce their compute cost by 90%.
90%.
So yeah, so that was awesome. And then another one is Lyft, San Francisco-based rideshare company. So by using AWS Spot instances, Lyft also saves up to 90% a month simply by changing 4 lines of code.
Wow.
So that's a great story. Yeah. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, those are really good use cases. And I can say from my experience as well, we've worked with customers frequently to utilize Spot instances and to build automation in that allow them to maximize their utilization and really address their cost problem. So Spot is a great option. It does require a little bit more effort, but your efforts will be rewarded. So next up are dedicated hosts. I'm not going to go too deep here today because it's not really an optimization option. There are ways you can optimize with dedicated, but realistically, I just wanted to make sure I covered all my bases here. It's essentially a physical EC2 server dedicated to your use. It's very useful for leveraging existing server-bound software licenses, and it can definitely help you with compliance as well. So if you have some of those use cases, this is an amazing offering from AWS. We do have customers who utilize dedicated hosts, and there are ways that you can reserve them as well. So you can purchase them on demand or with a reservation. And again, they have the advantage of bare metal with full integration with the rest of AWS. So if this is you'll know it, and you'll find great ways that you can utilize dedicated hosts. Definitely consider a reservation for those dedicated hosts, especially if you have a static type of workload. So now let's jump into reserved instances, because I think this represents the biggest opportunity for savings for the vast majority of cases that I've encountered. And that's generally because there is a low degree of complexity, and you get very significant savings if you're willing to put in a little bit of analysis, right? So what is a reserved instance exactly? A reserved instance is an EC2 instance that is purchased for a committed and fixed period of time. So 12 or 36 months, so 1 or 3 years, and you can get savings of up to 75% over on-demand pricing. And the real catch here is that you have to have that commitment, which means that you have to do some sort of analysis, understanding about what would be prudent for you to commit to. So what are some use cases here? Applications that have a very steady state or predictable usage, or even applications that have predictable usage patterns, right? We'll get into that as a best practice in a little bit. Again, 12 or 36 month commitment, and there's different ways, other choices involved as well about how much money you put down up front versus no money up front, and your savings will vary. Another interesting use case for reserved instances is actually to provide sort of a capacity reservation in a particular region. It's a way to basically say, I want to guarantee that there will be available capacity for me in this region. So I'm going to go ahead and pre-buy it, reserve that capacity. That can be very useful, especially for applications that have kind of localized users that they want to serve. It's a pretty interesting use case. So let's talk about those choices that there are. There's 3 main choices, levers that you can kind of pull and push that will balance that payment, flexibility, and cost, right, model. So the first one is the term itself. So it can be 1 year or 3 years. The longer you commit, the greater your savings are. That's obviously, Amazon would love it. The longer you commit, it's really good for their books, obviously, if they can know that workload is going to be there, that compute will be spoken for, so they're willing to give you a greater discount. Second choice you have to make is between a standard reserved instance or a convertible reserved instance. With a standard reserved instance, you are committing to a very particular type and size of instance. And with a convertible, you have the option to exchange that instance for another convertible reserved instance at a later date during your term. That flexibility increase comes with a reduced savings. So generally speaking, you're going to find greater savings if you stick with standard RIs, though convertibles can be very useful. One thing that we'll talk about later is the RI marketplace. Frequently people, I encourage them to take advantage of standard RIs and just be willing to sell them at a later date on the RI marketplace if they wish to change up to a larger or different reserved instance. And partners like us can help with that. So finally, the third choice is what we lovingly refer to as NURI, PURI, or ARI, right? And that stands for no upfront reserved instance, partial upfront reserved instance, or all upfront reserved instance. This represents the model in which you pay Amazon for this committed instance. In a no upfront reserved instance, you are making a commitment to pay for that reservation over your term, but you're doing so on a monthly basis of payment. That means you don't put any money down up front. You just make the commitment and then you pay on a monthly basis from that point forward for the duration of your term. A partial upfront is where you put some portion of the money down, sort of a down payment on that reservation, and then you make smaller monthly payments throughout the term. You get a slightly higher discount here than you would on a NURI. And finally, an ARI, which offers you the biggest savings. You put down all of the money up front for your 12 or 36-month term, you make no more payments during that duration, and you get the biggest savings. So that's the choices you have to make, the different levers you can pull. So let's talk a little bit about, well, actually, before we talk about some kind of savings themselves, Bhushan, I'd actually be curious to hear your view on how reservations can be used with other AWS managed services.
Yeah, so like the way we can reserve instance for our compute needs, same way Amazon RDS reserve instance provide the option to reserve the instances for your database needs. So it gives you the option to reserve database instance for 1 or 3-year term, and in turn, you will receive a significant discount compared to the on-demand database instance. So for example, reserved instance can save up to 69% over on-demand rate when used in steady state, like the way we discussed on the compute side. And also, all reserved instance types are database types are available under this RDS reserve instance. For example, you can use it for Aurora, MySQL, MariaDB, PostgreSQL, Oracle, and all other. And one good thing is these reserved database instances are available in all AWS regions. So that's great.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's really, that's available on any EC2 backed service that AWS provides. You'll find the ability to do reservations. And again, it's something a partner can really help with. So let's talk a little bit about what the savings might look like. I'm going to give you 2 examples here of 2 types of instances that are kind of interesting to look at. So the first is a T3.small, and in both cases here I'm using Linux-backed instances because I don't want to add on the additional cost of licensing. So these are the standard Linux instances. You can see here the 1-year NURI at the top left there saves you about 38% over on demand. So you put nothing up front, you pay $9.49 a month for 1 year, and that saves you 38%. If you go all the way up to the top there at the very bottom row that's highlighted in orange, that is a 3-year all upfront reserved instance. So you pay the $246 up front, nothing monthly, but what you end up with is a 55% savings over on demand. As you go to larger and larger instances, the savings really do increase. So here is an example, a C5 extra large, again, a Linux-backed instance. You'll see that, again, 36% on the NURI, 1 year, all the way up at the ARI, the all upfront instance, $1,612 up front, but you save 64% over on demand. So that is a huge, huge savings. So you can see there's a pretty big differential between the 1-year commitments and 3-year commitments, and from the no upfront to the all upfront. So that's the impact that you can make with reserved instances. And again, none of these necessarily require application level changes, especially if your application is running at a steady state. And that really takes us to kind of all those choices we have to make. how do we decide how to become well optimized, how to use all of these options that are available for us? So, one of the best things that I think AWS has produced in the past, kind of 10 years is the AWS WellArchitected Framework. It is, we've done a webinar series on it as well. There's lots of great documentation out there on it, but it's a collection of best practices across 5 pillars. And one of those pillars is actually cost optimization. And AWS really does drive home the point that the best way to become optimized is really to let data guide you. You need to understand your workload. You need to collect detailed information about your usage patterns, time of day, seasonality, if you have event-based kind of demand. So if you're an e-commerce kind of workload that is maybe focused around the Christmas holiday, you might have a huge spike that you can predict. Understanding all of that usage pattern is a critical factor. And that's something that the well-architected framework really guides you to. In addition, you need to understand the different aspects of your workload, right? Often a workload is divided up into many distinct components or kind of microservices. Some of those may require real-time compute, and others can be done and processed out of band, making them a great candidate for spot instances. And finally, there's financial and commitment and risk considerations. Are you willing to commit? Can you take that risk and make that commitment over a long period of time? Do you have the financial kind of capability to put all of the money up front? If you do, you can really increase your savings. Finally, because of all these choices and complexity and gathering of data, this is a place that we are frequently engaged with customers. Partners like Mission, we are certified partners. We spend a lot of our time helping customers get optimized. We can provide RI assessments. We can do full continuous consultation on staying optimized. And Bhushan, do you have any sort of insights about partner engagement within the AWS customer base?
Yeah, actually. So the majority of Fortune 500 companies and over 90% of Fortune 100 companies utilize AWS API and partner solution and services. And this is like public stat. And also with Mission team, I've been working with a couple of successful engagements since last year, and it's been great so far. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, it's amazing to hear that 90%, over 90% of the Fortune 100 is engaged with a partner, and there's good reason for it, right? We're constantly staying up to date with AWS's never-ending innovation cycle, right? They're constantly introducing new pricing, new programs, new discounts, new ways to save and to optimize, and it's our job to stay on top of it so you can focus on innovating. So it's good to hear that's backed up by what we're actually seeing in the market. So let's talk about, once you have gathered all this data, how to actually apply it to your workload. So this is an illustration of one way to look at optimizing. And for a best practice perspective, you can see here sort of a pattern of usage, right? Demand increasing over the course of the day and then decreasing. This is a smooth curve, but it could be totally not smooth. It could happen over the course of a year instead of over the course of a day or a month, right? The important thing here is watching your usage patterns. So baseline capacity, this is what I would call this is where you would say your steady state, your always available capacity. You can reserve that for maximum savings. Do an all upfront reserved instance over a 3-year term, or no upfront if financially you're not willing to do the all upfront. That'll maximize your savings there, give you that kind of baseline. And then you can handle spikes with both on-demand instances and spot instances. Most customers, when they get started with optimization, they first layer in on-demand for spikes. It is the easiest thing to do, right? Pretty easy to automate and use things like auto-scaling groups and other features of AWS to cause that scaling to happen automatically. But if you get quite advanced or you engage with a partner who knows how to do it, we can also take advantage of Spot for burst capacity as well, and then fall back to on-demand. And this gives you a really nice balance of savings. And finally, you can leverage spot instances, like I said before, for parts of your workload that you've identified and segmented out and said, this can really happen out of band. This doesn't need to happen in real time. So that is my #1 recommendation. And this is very much in line with how AWS views optimization with EC2 as well. So
agree.
Given all of that, let's talk about a special program that Mission has introduced that we'd really love to share with you. And it's called the Rio Program, or the Reserved Instance Optimization Program. So as we've touched on, all upfront reserved instances over the 3-year commitment are the best tool to reduce Amazon EC2 spend. It requires minimal effort on your part, just requires a commitment and the all upfront kind of payment. Now, a lot of businesses, when I tell them about this, they're a little bit nervous about putting all of that money out, right? And we're sensitive to that fact, and because we work with a lot of customers to become optimized, and we've become very, very good at managing reserved instances, we've created a program called RIO. And this gives you access to the all upfront reserved instance pricing, but without any upfront payment. So we'll effectively buy those on your behalf and pass most of the savings on to you. And you also get a whole bunch of other services as part of the program, including an RI analysis report from our cost optimization experts. You get monthly invoicing that's really simple and easy to understand. A lot of times people have a struggle interpreting their invoices that they get from AWS and trying to understand their spend. We make it a little bit more approachable because we work directly with you. In addition, you get access to a cloud optimization portal, which is a great user experience, user interface where you can go through and really understand and break down your spend. And finally, you get a strategic consulting session with our team, which can help you roadmap and figure out where you want to go from here. It's an awesome program. There's some qualification that's necessary, so it's available to net new customers to Mission resale. So you essentially are going to be buying your AWS spend through Mission. With a $10,000 a month minimum spend, we just generally speaking find that is where the program is most impactful to the customer. And you will get AWS business support through Mission. It's partner-led, so that gives you great support directly with Mission and with pass-through to AWS, backing that support for any questions that come up. And consolidated billing under our master payer account, payment via ACH or credit card, and a commitment to that program for the same duration as the RI that you're purchasing, right? And finally, root access to the AWS account to ensure that we can do all of the work that's necessary to keep you optimized. So that's the RIO program. Wanted to mention that for anyone who is interested, and you can reach out directly and we can connect you with an account exec if you're interested in pursuing that. So now let's go into some more kind of questions and answers with Bhushan. He's been great to have here, and as questions have come up, but I'm always thinking about new kind of questions to explore. And so one of the things that popped in my head while we were talking is, my interpretation of on-demand, reserved, and spot, how well does that line up with AWS's recommendation? Is that generally speaking how AWS views the world?
Yes, actually, you covered it really well. So our recommendation is also same, to start with understanding of the steady state requirements, what is steady state needs for your application, and maybe putting reserve instances for that. And then depending on on demand, basically spikes or certain spikes, or maybe if you have seasonal traffic, use on demand for that. Use on demand for even for development and maybe other internal one-off purposes as well. And spot instances have a very different use case, as you covered, when you have flexible start and end times, or where some research related activities that are only feasible economically if we are using a very low compute prices. So use spot instances there. So yeah, it very well aligns with what you said earlier.
Great. Well, it's good to know that we're on the right track. And yeah, I think, just to revisit, test and develop is one of those use cases that people frequently talk to me about. And, on demand, people shouldn't feel threatened by using on demand, right? It's there for a reason. And one of the great benefits to AWS and to cloud is, real-time ready access to resources. So you can experiment and try new things. And that's what it's there for, right? Don't be afraid to take advantage of on demand. If you have a use case that you don't feel like you can reserve, that's okay, right? It's totally appropriate to use on demand. It's just aligning your usage with the different use cases that are served by these different types. Okay, so
right. And yeah, and just to add on to that, if you are using it for development and test needs, you can very well set up the billing meters that would alert you if it's going below above a threshold. And also, when you don't need it, you can shut it down, so you won't be billed for that. It's pay as you go. So
right. Yeah, one thing we've done, glad you brought that up actually, for our customers is when they have test and develop kind of infrastructure, we will automate spinning it up and down during business hours, for example, or even automate it based upon presence of a particular developers. That's another use case that I've heard frequently. So
That's
yeah,
great.
definitely good use cases for on demand. Um, One of the things we talked about when it came to reserved instances, especially when it comes to convertible versus standard, is the RI marketplace. It's sort of a little bit of a nuanced thing. Can you give us some insight about how the RI marketplace works?
Yeah, so like if you have reserve instance and you don't need it for like maybe specific duration or time and all, so there's a marketplace, this RI marketplace, that supports the sale of this sort of third party and AWS customer unused standard reserved instances. One thing to note here is like to sell these unused instances there, you must register as a seller in the reserve instant marketplace, and it's a
Right.
quick process.
Yes.
Uh, and also, like as soon as you list your RI there, this would be available in the marketplace for potential buyers. And yeah, all these reserve instance would be grouped by according to the duration of the term remaining and the hourly prices. So yeah, it's pretty flexible there.
It's very flexible. And the thing that's interesting to me about the marketplace is there's advantage for both sides, right? So if you have made a commitment and then you later realize that you need to change, right, for any reason at all, the marketplace is a great out for you. You can go and you have access to, offload that commitment to somebody else who's willing to take it on. And in my experience, it's very, very fast. If you set an appropriate price, you will get that RI sold very quickly. And so it really mitigates the risk and the worry around reserved instances, especially reserved standard reserved instances. There's always a marketplace there you can fall back on. And on the flip side, if you're looking for some capacity, the marketplace is a great place to look, right? You can say, look, I want a reserve, but I only want to reserve for 6 months. You can go in and pick up a reserved instance that only has 6 months remaining on its term, for example. And it may have been a 3-year reserved instance. So you're getting, much greater savings. That's another thing that a partner can really help with is, pouring through the marketplace, always searching for the best, most optimized kind of deal for the customer. So thanks for that insight. And then tell me a little bit about convertible RIs. What are the trade-offs for, using a convertible RI versus a standard RI?
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you asked this. So like, yeah, when we buy this reserve instance, we can choose between standard or convertible, offering class. So one great benefit of convertible RI is like it could be exchanged during the term. Like you can exchange it to like different instance family, instance type, different platform, scope or tenancy. All that options are there. Flexibility is there. That's great. Now, one constraint that comes with convertible RI is it cannot be sold in the reserve instance marketplace, the one that we discussed before, at
Right.
least at this point. So that's the only downside I would say. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so, that's a balance, right? So there's, one thing I always tell people is that even if you go with standard, you can mitigate that kind of risk or that discomfort because of the marketplace. Convertible is a great option, but you lose that capability. So while you gain some flexibility, there is a significant trade-off there. So, maybe that'll change in the future, but at this moment, it's an important note, right, to be aware of. There's great use cases for convertible and standard. So it's good to know the trade-offs. I guess the one last question that I really wanted to discuss is the top mistakes, maybe the top 2 or 3 mistakes that you see when it comes to cost optimization.
Yeah. And we covered like some of this like earlier. Like so, most commonly we see like customer using either the oversized instances, like for like a smaller compute need, they are using a bigger instance that is costing more, or they are using too many instances when they don't need it. Like they can very well do the like basically put the load balancer and they can like maybe add or remove instances based on their need, but they start with too many instances or they just keep their instances running. Like for their development activities, it's running like 24 hours, even though they just need it for 8 hours.
Right.
So this would all impact like the utilization as well as the billing. And another one I would say would be like not monitoring the AWS cost using the services that we have provided, or there are many available from our partners as well. So like some of the services like CloudWatch, or maybe they can very well set up the alerts. So maybe not putting that together. So that's another mistake we see customer, and that's where like partners like Mission help like customer like maybe with the well-architected review and just maybe discussing with them and seeing like where all they can put this optimization in place. So
Right.
yeah.
It's great. Yeah, really, really good insight there. And I'll completely back you on that. I agree. Those are very common cases that we see. And one of the kind of aspects and nuances there that I think is really interesting is attribution of cost. A lot of times people think about cost as this, monolithic thing, right? Like, what's my overall spend? And that's important, right? In reducing your overall spend, but also aligning that spend and putting it in the right places to make positive impacts, to your business goals. And that really comes down to attribution, understanding what business unit is this particular aspect of my spend coming from, what cost center, what workload, what application, what feature even. And that is a feature that we spend a lot of time working with our customers on, who engage us with, through the Rio program and through cloud optimization program. Understanding where is my spend going? Because once you understand that, you can really see, are we really focusing on the place where our business goals are aligned? So I think that's a really good insights for sure. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Bhushan. I appreciate it, and thank you to all who are attending and viewing this webinar. If you have any questions, definitely let us know. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to hearing from you and engaging with you, helping you save some money. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.